Bill Clinton built his presidential campaign by publicly destroying a black woman who dared to speak for her community, and Democrats have been running that same playbook on our freedom fighters ever since.
Let's stand up for what's always been best about the Rainbow Coalition, which is people coming together across racial lines. You talked about Mr. Fields from Louisiana that you had here last night, a great role model. We don't have a lot of time to do this. We don't have a lot of time. You had a rap singer here last night named Sista Souljah. I defend her right to express herself through music. But her comments before and after Los Angeles were filled with the kind of hatred that you do not honor today and tonight. Just listen to this, what she said. She told the Washington Post about a month ago, and I quote, "If black people kill black people every day, why not have a week and kill white people? So you're a gang member and you normally kill somebody, why not kill a white person?" Last year she said, "You can't call me or any black person anywhere in the world a racist. We don't have the power to do to white people what white people have done to us. And even if we did, we don't have that low-down, dirty nature. If there are any good white people, I haven't met them. Where are they? Right here in this room. That's where they are." I know she is a young person, but she has a big influence on a lot of people. And when people say that, if you took the words white and black and you reversed them, you might think David Duke was giving that speech. Let me tell you, we all make mistakes, and sometimes we're not as sensitive as we ought to be. And we have an obligation, all of us, to call attention to prejudice wherever we see it. A few months ago, I made a mistake. I joined a friend of mine and I played golf at a country club that didn't have any African American members. I was criticized for doing it. You know what? I was rightly criticized for doing it. I made a mistake. And I said I would never do that again. And I think all of us have got to be sensitive to that. We can't get anywhere in this country pointing the finger at one another across racial lines. If we do that, we're dead, and they will beat us. Even in Reverend Jackson's new math of this election, it's hard to get to a 34% solution or a 40% solution if the American people can be divided by race.
Let me tell you about a political assassination that did not involve bullets but destroyed a reputation just the same. June 13th, 1992, Bill Clinton, then governor of Arkansas running for president, stood before Jesse Jackson's Rainbow Coalition and verbally attacked a young black woman named Sista Souljah, who was not even in the room to defend herself. This was not an accident. This was not a spontaneous moment. This was a calculated political strategy that would become known as the Sister Souljah moment, and it set a precedent that Democrats still use today when they need to prove to white voters that they will not let black people get too bold. But before we get to that betrayal, let me tell you who Sista Souljah actually was, because they tried to reduce her entire existence to one controversial quote taken completely out of context. Lisa Williamson, who became known as Sista Souljah, was not just a rapper. She was an activist, an organizer, and an advocate who had been doing real work in black communities long before Bill Clinton decided to use her as a political prop. Sista Souljah grew up in the projects in New York. She saw poverty, violence, and systemic neglect up close. She was not theorizing about oppression from an ivory tower. She lived it. And instead of being destroyed by those circumstances, she educated herself, attended Rutgers University on a full scholarship, and studied American history and African studies. She spent a summer in Zimbabwe doing development work. She came back to America with a clearer understanding of how global systems of oppression operate and a commitment to wake her people up. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, she became involved in hip-hop as a platform for political education. She was part of Public Enemy's organization, working with them on community programs. She organized health fairs and housing projects. She set up programs to educate young people about AIDS when the government was ignoring the epidemic ravaging black communities. She worked on voter registration drives. She was out there doing the actual work of community building while politicians were taking photo ops and making empty promises. Her music reflected the rage and reality of black youth in America. Songs like The Final Solution, Slavery's Back in Effect were not pop radio material. They were political education set to beats. She talked about police brutality, economic exploitation, and systemic racism with the kind of raw honesty that made people uncomfortable. And that was the point. She was not trying to make white America comfortable. She was trying to wake Black America up. Then came the LA riots in April 1992. Rodney King had been beaten nearly to death by police on camera, and the officers were acquitted anyway. South Central Los Angeles erupted. The anger that had been building for decades exploded into the streets, and everyone wanted to talk about it, including the Washington Post, which interviewed Sista Souljah in May 1992. In that interview, she made comments about the violence during the riots. She was speaking to the hypocrisy of white people who were shocked that Black people were violent for a week when white people had been violent toward Black people for centuries. The quote that would be weaponized against her was taken from a longer discussion about the rage and desperation that leads to riots. But nuance does not matter when you need a villain for your political narrative.
I have seen people playing my videos and showing the section where I say, I am African first, I am Black first, I want what's good for me and my people first. That is a natural and normal posture of self-love. So I think that the media should stop portraying that as hatred. Irish people have their clubs, Jewish people have their synagogues and Jewish community centers where they congregate. That is not seen as hatred. It is a long and historical thing that anytime Black people gather and unify, it's seen as a mob, a riot, a hostile environment. I think that that's wrong. I deeply love the young brothers that are in Los Angeles, even as they are confused in many ways. But I remind the press that the Bloods and the Crips made a historic leap, declared a truce, and was so shaken by the obvious recorded video of Rodney King that they have become much more receptive to developing constructive solutions for their particular situation. And so I'm deeply gladdened by that.
Bill Clinton, who was running for president and desperately trying to distance himself from being seen as the candidate of Black people and liberal interest groups, saw an opportunity. He was scheduled to speak at Jesse Jackson's Rainbow Coalition conference in Washington. Sista Souljah had spoken at the same conference the day before. Clinton's campaign strategists saw their opening. They could publicly attack this young Black woman, demonstrate to white moderate voters that Clinton would not be controlled by Black activists, and signal that he was a different kind of Democrat. So there stood Bill Clinton in front of Jesse Jackson and a room full of civil rights leaders, and he compared Sista Souljah to David Duke, the former Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan. He said her comments were filled with hatred and that if you reverse the races, there was not much difference between her and Duke. He did this knowing she was not there to respond. He did this knowing the full context of her comments. He did this knowing it would humiliate Jesse Jackson, who had invited her to speak. He did not care. It was political strategy, and she was collateral damage. The effect on Sista Souljah's life was immediate and devastating. She went from being a respected activist and artist to being a national pariah overnight. Record labels dropped her. Speaking opportunities dried up. She became radioactive in mainstream spaces. The media ran with Clinton's narrative, rarely providing the full context of her original comments. She was turned into a symbol, a cautionary tale about what happens when Black people speak too boldly, too angrily, too honestly about their oppression. But here's what they could not take from her voice and her pen. Sista Souljah eventually became a best-selling novelist, writing books like The Coldest Winter Ever and Midnight that told stories about Black life with the same unflinching honesty she brought to her activism and music. She refused to disappear, even though that was clearly what they wanted. She rebuilt her platform in a different medium and continued to reach people with her message. Jesse Jackson was furious about the ambush. He understood immediately what Clinton had done. Clinton had used Jackson's platform to attack a young Black woman in order to distance himself from Jackson and from Blackness in general. It was a betrayal, but it worked. White moderate voters saw Clinton as someone who would stand up to Black activists. He won the election, and the Sista Souljah moment became a term in political science textbooks, describing when politicians publicly criticize ostracize members of their own coalition to appeal to another group. Let's be clear about what that strategy actually is. It is throwing Black people under the bus for political gain. It is sacrificing Black voices to appease white comfort. It is signaling that Black people's concerns are expendable when they become politically inconvenient. And Democrats have been doing it ever since. Fast forward to today, and we are watching the same playbook in action. Every election cycle, Democrats find Black activists, Black movements, or Black demands that they can publicly distance themselves from to prove they are not too radical or too Black for white voters. When Black Lives Matter activists push too hard for defunding police, Democratic politicians rush to microphones to say, "That's not what we stand for." When activists demanded reparations, Democrats said, "We need to focus on policies that help all Americans." When young Black organizers criticized Israel's treatment of Palestinians, Democratic leadership shut them down and accused them of being divisive. The pattern is consistent. Black people do the work of organizing, of mobilizing voters, of building movements. Then, when it is politically convenient, Democratic politicians publicly rebuke those same Black activists to signal to white voters that they will keep Black people in check. They take our votes, use our labor, and then sacrifice our leaders when they need to prove they are moderate or reasonable. This is why so many Black activists and organizers have become disillusioned with the Democratic Party. We keep watching them use the Sister Souljah playbook on our freedom fighters. They did it to Colin Kaepernick when he took a knee. They did it to Ilhan Omar when she criticized American foreign policy. They do it to any Black voice that speaks too boldly about systemic racism, economic justice, or Palestinian liberation. The message is always the same. You can be part of our coalition, but only if you stay in your place and do not make white voters uncomfortable. What happened to Sista Souljah was not about what she actually said. It was about making an example of a Black woman who refused to moderate her message for white acceptance. It was about showing Black activists that there are consequences for being too radical, too angry, too honest. It was about maintaining control over how Black people are allowed to speak about our oppression. The tragedy is that Sista Souljah was right about so much of what she was saying. She was right about police brutality. She was right about economic exploitation. She was right about systemic racism. She was right about the rage and desperation that poverty creates. But being right does not protect you when politicians need a scapegoat. And here's what really makes this painful. Bill Clinton went on to become president and implemented policies that devastated Black communities. The 1994 crime bill that he championed led to mass incarceration of Black people on a scale never seen before. His welfare reform pushed Black families deeper into poverty. His financial deregulation set the stage for the 2008 economic crisis that wiped out Black wealth. The man who attacked Sista Souljah for her rhetoric about violence against Black people then presided over policies that enacted systemic violence against Black communities for decades. That is the real story. Clinton did not attack Sista Souljah because he cared about reducing violence or promoting unity. He attacked her because it was politically useful. Meanwhile, the actual policies he supported created more violence, more poverty, and more suffering in Black communities than any rapper's lyrics ever could. Today's Democratic Party still operates from the same playbook. They want Black voters to turn out in high numbers, but they want Black activists to stay quiet about systemic issues that might alienate white moderates. They want our votes, but not our voices. They want our organizing energy, but not our demands for justice. And when Black people refuse to play that game, when we insist on speaking our truth boldly and unapologetically, they find ways to marginalize us, just like they did to Sista Souljah. The freedom fighters among us are still being attacked. The ones who talk about reparations too loudly. The ones who critique American imperialism too directly. The ones who connect the struggles of Black people domestically to the struggles of colonized people globally. The ones who refuse to vote for Democrats just because they are slightly better than Republicans. The ones who demand tangibles instead of symbolism. Democrats still use them as political punching bags when they need to prove they are not controlled by the radical left. But here is what they do not understand. Every time they throw one of our freedom fighters under the bus, they lose credibility with the very people they need. Black voters, especially young Black voters, are watching. We see the pattern. We see them use us and then abuse us. We see them take our votes for granted and then sacrifice our leaders for political expediency. And we are tired of it. Sista Souljah survived her political assassination and built a new platform. She never apologized for speaking her truth. She never moderated her message to regain mainstream acceptance. She stayed true to herself and found success on her own terms. That is the lesson for today's freedom fighters. Do not wait for validation from people who will use you as a stepping stone. Build your own platforms. Speak your truth boldly. Organize your community independently. Because history shows us that Democratic politicians will sacrifice you the moment it becomes politically convenient. Bill Clinton demonized Sista Souljah because she represented something he needed to destroy to win white votes. An unapologetic black woman speaking truth to power. 30 years later, Democrats are still running that same play. The names change, but the strategy remains. And until we stop allowing them to use our freedom fighters as political props, until we demand better, until we build power independent of their approval, they will keep doing it. Sista Souljah taught us that lesson in 1992. We would be wise to remember it today.